Bé, doncs continuem ara amb la xerrada del Michael Bauer. Bé, no sé, jo crec que ha estat superinteressant la xerrada de l'Aron Pilhofer, tota una lliçó de periodisme. I en Michael Bauer, que ja us l'ha presentat abans el degà, és informàtic, és activista, però sobretot és membre de l'Open Knowledge Foundation. L'Open Knowledge Foundation és una organització internacional que treballa en 35 països i, per fer-ho curt i ràpid, us animo a que passeu per la seva pàgina. És una organització que promou el coneixement obert en totes les seves facetes. Està treballant en projectes d'Open Government, està treballant en projectes d'Open Data, estem fent des d'Espanya també la part de periodisme de dades i ara us ho explicarà ell en més detall, però l'Open Knowledge Foundation té un capítol que es va crear fa justament un any, aquí el que suposa Espanya, i aquí a Catalunya hi som uns quants que estem treballant en diferents àrees. En Michael està aquí sobretot perquè, no sé si algun de vosaltres va estar en les jornades de periodisme de dades i Open Data que es van fer aquí al CCCB i a Blanquerna, en aquesta facultat, el passat mes de maig. Van ser 3 dies per explorar tot el que era això del periodisme de dades i en Michael va ser un dels ponents que ja va explicar en el seu moment què és el que feia i va fer un taller de web scrapping. Doncs com el vam conèixer i ens va agradar tantíssim i teníem l'oportunitat de fer un esdeveniment especial dedicat al periodisme digital i al periodisme de dades, juntament amb l'Aron Pilhofer li vam dir també que estigués avui aquí per explicar què és això de l'Open Knowledge Foundation, quins projectes treballen a nivell internacional a l'Àfrica, a Europa, als Estats Units i us recordo pel que estigui molt interessat en el que és el periodisme de dades i en com analitzar les dades que aquesta tarda al Centre de Cultura Contemporània, aquí al davant, tornaran a estar en Michael i l'Aron, però Michael farà un taller de web scrapping, que és com agafar dades en brut de les webs, com posar-les en un format que després es puguin analitzar. I això serà aquesta tarda a les 5 al CCCB. I ara ja us deixo amb tot el que ens ha d'explicar Michael. It's your turn. Thank you.
Hey everyone. Thanks, Carmen, for the invitation and the introduction. I want to start out with saying this is me, this is my Twitter handle. Usually my computer looks like this. But sometimes it also looks like this. I used to do very, very different things. For me, it's still an oddity after a year or so that I'm frequently tossed into rooms with journalists because I used to do something very different. I studied medicine, and after medicine I did stuff like this. I did research, medical research on cardiology. So I spent my days and nights, almost as many nights as days, in laboratories, torturing mice and finding out things and figuring out how the heart works and how we can improve certain things. And doing so, I realized one thing. I realized I'm very good at handling data, and I can pull off projects like the one I'm showing here, where a lot of data comes out of machines, and I need to transform them into knowledge. And during that time, I started playing with things like this. This is actually my first sort of way getting into data visualization. This is a little bit of code in processing, a language made for data visualization. That just here shows the experimental results we got out of this one, and you don't need to really understand this. But it was a way to display information that never had been displayed before. And while doing this, I realized that I could do this, but all the people around me that were classically trained biologists couldn't. It was really hard for them to run an experiment with a machine, and then they got a huge spreadsheet out, and then they spent all day trying to produce 1 or 2 or 3 graphs. And I watched them do this, and I thought, this is actually not their job. Their job is not to cut and paste things in Excel just to make a graph, just to understand what the experiment says. Their job is to think about the experiment. I had my stuff lined up so that when I got new data, I had graphs in 5 minutes, and I could spend the rest of my day not cutting and pasting, but thinking about my experiments. So I thought this is something really important for people. But I also realized research is not the thing I want to do. Because what I want to do, and what I'm really, really passionate about, is stuff like this. This is a result of my work of 1.5 years ago that came out last week. This is an ongoing process in front of the European Court of Justice against the Data Retention Directive, which is a directive in the European Union. Has anyone not heard about PRISM and the stuff Edward Snowden leaked about the NSA? We don't need secret agencies in Europe to do this kind of stuff. We have laws that oblige every state to do this kind of stuff. So I fought with a group of friends to get these laws away. We did giant campaigns in Austria that finally landed in front of the European Court of Justice. And right now the Advocate General gave his opinion and said really to our favor that he doesn't think that the European Data Directive is in any way conform with the European concept of fundamental rights. Which is something that makes people like me very, very happy. So what I was really passionate about is more freedom in a digital age. How does technology change our society, and how can we remain a free and active society through technology? And more recently, I did things like this. This is the government program of the new government we got in Austria today, with some protests ahead. Unfortunately, I'm here, so I can't be on the streets. But because I can't be on the street, I did this. This is a version of the program of the government, so what they want to do. And this allows people to come and comment this and say, by the way, and these are the random people on the internet. I have no idea who wrote this comment, but it's a very good comment. It's about creating more university posts. And this says, hey, if this is the same kind of posts that were created in the previous years, this doesn't make any sense, right? Because these posts are really not made for you to do anything, but they're just so you sit somewhere. You don't even get a chair. So I help people interact, and I'm passionate about using technology to interact and increase the interaction between us as citizens and the government, and use technology to sort of figure out what's good in the world. And the reason I'm here is because I work with an organization that's called the Open Knowledge Foundation. And I'm here to introduce the Open Knowledge Foundation to you using a few slides. And since I believe that more brain cells have been killed through slide decks than through alcohol, I beg you to interrupt me anytime there's something very, very interesting and you want to ask a question. Interrupt me if there's something I say that's not clear. If there's something you don't share my opinion with, I'm very, very happy to discuss this. You're probably not the only one who thinks that what this guy is saying is bullshit. So just say it. I'd rather have an interesting discussion than torture you with the 20-something slides I have. So the Open Knowledge Foundation, I started working with a little more than a year ago, is a global network to open up knowledge around the world. And I will go and talk a little bit about what this means. And we want to see this knowledge not only open, but we want to see this knowledge used and useful to people. And we do this and did this in the past primarily through advocating for open data. So open data is one of the buzzwords you might hear a lot if you really dive into data journalism. Open data is data that you can use you can access, You can use it for anything you'd like, and you can share whatever you created out of this data without any restriction, or at maximum the restriction that you mention the source as an attribution. So this means this is data you can take, and you can build a business around it. This is data you can take, write an article, and sell this article to a newspaper. This is data you can take, build an application that helps citizens understand the world and share it freely so everyone can have it on their smartphones, or build an application on the internet. Often if we talk about open data, we actually talk about open government data, so data the government has, but it is no way limited to governments. There's a project I've done for activism where I used open data, but I didn't use open government data. I used data from research projects and visualized data from research projects, and this helped us tremendously in that campaign. So open data, while we often think about governments and think that administration, for example, needs to tell us where schools are and needs to give us results from schools, so that you could build something similar to what the New York Times has done, where you can rank schools and figure out which schools are close by, and help citizens and your readers to find the best school for the kids. It's by no way limited to this. I wasn't involved with anything open data before I joined the Open Knowledge Foundation. I did a lot of digital activism, but there were two kinds of people I thought were very, very boring. The one were the data protection people, who were always scared about anything that their data is used and abused. And the other one was the open data people, which I understood equally less. Because all the open data people seem to care about is having numbers on websites, right? If you look, if you listen to some of the advocates, they go out and tell you, yeah, you just put this, you just get some piece of software and you put your numbers online, and then they're there, and then the world will change, right? This is not how it happens, right? Numbers on websites are not the goal. And you might have noticed, but I don't work at the Open Data Foundation. And this is the thing that really makes me happy. I work at the Open Knowledge Foundation. So what is open knowledge, right? Open knowledge is what gets created if open data is made useful, is made accessible to people, is made understandable, meaningful, and knowledge finally is created when we apply whatever information we have gained to solve real problems, to change the world. And this is really what I'm passionate about. When I was doing research, I realized that the data you get out of an experiment is not information. It's just something. It's not something that helps you until you go, look at it, process it, analyze it, and turn it into information by putting it into context, by knowing what it means, by knowing what the number means, by knowing how the number is to be interpreted in your set of experiment, in the set of context. And this is a key point that I would like to strike out. We often think of data and information as being equivalent, and is often used equivalent. For example, there is a new directive on the European Union called the EPSI directive, which is the public service information directive. But what it is actually about is public service data. And this is something you will find very often, is that we use the terms data and information interchangeably, but they're actually not. Information is what data becomes if we make it accessible, if we make it, if we put it into context, if we provide more information, if we mesh it up with other data. I used the word mesh up. Where's Aron? This is what data becomes, right? Data is sort of the resource, the basic resource. There's a wonderful graphic showing this with a cake. In a cake, data would be the ingredients. The cake would be the information. and wisdom is when you ate and shared the cake with your friends. So we are not passionate about just having data, having numbers on websites, but we are really passionate about seeing this data be used, and seeing this data be used to change the way we do things in society. And how do we do this? I mentioned this before. We are a global network. We bring people together, be this local communities, be this individuals, be this people who want to do projects. And we facilitate them working together. We bring them together at events. We organize some of them. Many of them are organized around the community, like this one, or this series of events Karma organizes, or the Jornadas de Periodismo de Datos they organized in May. And sometimes we do one or the other campaign, like campaigns for making lobbying data more accessible and making lobbying data open. We joined a campaign with a journalist called Ben Goldecker on making clinical trial information open, so that you can see who sponsors which clinical trials actually happen. So this is very in the range of medicine. But this is very crucial information, because if a new medicine tries to get approved, you want to look at all the research that has been done there, and you want to see everything that happened there. And Ben Goldecker lobbies for this, and we support them doing this campaign. How do we do this? How do we do the stuff we're doing, and what are we doing? And this is best said by these 3 little icons. The first thing is we build tools. So a lot of people know us for our building tools. The second is we build and gather communities. We bring people together. And the third is we share knowledge widely and openly about what we do, and we share skills. Let's start with the tools. We've worked in the past to create a vast set of tools for open infrastructure that helps people either make data available. This is, for example, the CCAN project. It's a project that is right now the #1 data portal in the world. It's used by governments such as the government of the US and the government of the United Kingdom to publish their open data. I'm not sure whether it's used in Spain, but it's used pretty much worldwide. We built tools that help you make sense of what's coming out of the government. There's a project in there called Open Spending. That's a project that's specifically designed to work with government budgets. This was a result by different people trying to figure out how can we make budget data available to citizens? How can we make this understandable? And the first thing that happened was a project called Where Does My Money Go? I can share this here. It used data from the UK budgets and showed it in different ways. And the best way, I think, is this one. It's something called the Daily Bread, which if I select my salary here, is it not working? It's not working. Why is it not working? It was working now. If I select my salary here, it calculates how much taxes I pay, and how much of it every day goes into things like defense or health, or maybe culture. Maybe I care much more about culture, and if I pay this amount of taxes, how much really goes into culture, and how much into what kind of culture, right? How much goes to the media, how much goes to theaters, how much goes to churches? Or how much do I pay every day to keep the lights in my street running? This says £0 because it's a very, very little number, right? So
Spanish version.
There's a Spanish version, yes. That's very good. There's a Spanish version called ¿Dónde van mis impuestos? It's pretty much the same thing. At the time, Where Does My Money Go was established. This was something very, very new to do. And at that time, a guy in in Germany called Friedrich Lindenberg did this with the German budget. So he went, he got all the PDFs this budget was in, he got all the information out, and finally he put it on a website called Offener Haushalt. So it means open budget. And he didn't think a lot about what kind of impact this has. The interesting thing is the first people who asked questions about this, about the website, about the budget there, and about whether they can use it for other things, were politicians. There were members of the parliament who had never seen the budget presented in a way they could understand it. And suddenly it was there for them to see and clearly see relations and see how much is spent on social welfare and how much is spent on other things in the state. And they decided to join up and team up and create this project called Open Spending, which is a giant platform for analyzing both government expenditure and government budgets. And it now contains budgets, I don't know of how many countries, of a lot of countries. And there's one more adding every time. And it also allows you to build your own country-specific site, like Donde va mis impuestos? My Spanish is very bad. And sort of publish this and use this as a service in the back to publish your information. And this is happening around the world. This recently happened in Bosnia, and I think 2 days ago the Nepal budget was launched. And I don't know what you know about Nepal, but it doesn't seem to be the beacon of democracy and openness to many of us. But people around the world engage in this, and people around the world wonder, how do my governments sort of spend money? And they use this project, and use this project we create and still maintain to do this. So this is tools that are created that are open spending is by far the most successful one to make data intelligible and help you understand data. And if you want to visualize budgets, this is something that really helps you there. We also coordinate a small group of people around a thing we call Open Knowledge Foundation Labs, which is a small group of people who are interested in playing with new technologies. And one of the things that came out of there is this service called Annotator I used for exactly this project, where you can make text commentable in a way that I can just go and I can mark a piece of text, and then I can click and I can put in a comment, and the comment will be either publicly available or only available to me. So this allows people to collaboratively work on reading and interpreting text. Think about books that would work this way, where you can just mark something and comment something and say, by the way, I think this has to be seen in a different context. Or political documents like this, or a new law that's being proposed, and you invite all kinds of people together to just share their comments and just mark the interesting pieces like this. Then a JavaScript library called Recline that's fantastic to work with data in JavaScript. And then some specific projects like investigations into European energy consumption, etc. And then there's a very, very different kind of tooling. And the kind of tooling I think many people get in touch with and are not aware of this. I think the most used thing the Open Knowledge Foundation ever did was they came up with a license for open data. They came up with the open database license that is now used by projects such as OpenStreetMap. Who knows OpenStreetMap? One person knows OpenStreetMap, 2, 3, perfect. OpenStreetMap is an open alternative. Should I show this? Wait, I did something wrong. I don't want to search for API. It's an open alternative to Google Maps. It's a map that comes together by people like you and me running through the streets with GPS devices and maps and places where they don't have maps, and just putting stuff on the map and saying, by the way, I'm now in this street, and this building is this building, and Blanquerna is over here, and my favorite bar is over here, and between here and here we have a highway, and I just drive down the highway and record where the highway is. And then we all put this on a map. And if something is wrong, someone else can come and correct it. And this powers at the back of many, many apps out there that use map. They use this information created by people, with simply to have a map they can use. And this is very high qualitative data. A few years ago, my colleague Lucy went to Sarajevo and wanted to look up where her hotel was. And in Google Maps, there was just one road in the whole city. They just knew about one road. So there was no way she could find the hotel she was in. Luckily, she had the urge to look on OpenStreetMap, and actually there was the whole city. This leads so far that places like Kibera, one of the largest slums in Nairobi and world infamous, is one of the best mapped places on the planet, because there's a group of people who care about showing where stuff is there and showing how many people live there and what kind of infrastructure is there. And they just go around and map and map and map and map. And it's one of the most intensively mapped places, I think.
Also Spanish version with tutorials.
Yes, Karma points me to, what is it, OpenStreetMap.es. Yes. So there's a Spanish community that also has tutorials that show you how to do this. But I didn't want to talk so long about OpenStreetMap. I wanted to talk about that they are actually using a tool, a legal tool, that was created by the Open Knowledge Foundation a while back, called the Open Database License. Where was I? I was here. We further do things like create reference data sets. This is something that has recently started and is, I think, an interesting way to do things. I'm not sure whether it's going to be the best way to do things. But also to establish and to work on standards, how we can exchange data more easily. And one thing that came out there is a project that's called Frictionless Data that aims at making your working with data a lot easier and a lot more modular. That you can just say, I want new data about this, and I know someone has this, so I can simply get it onto my computer without worrying too long or searching on the internet for hours for new data. And the second thing I mentioned we do is we create communities, and we bring together communities. And this is this is an old map, but this is a map of the local groups and people who are engaged with the Open Knowledge Foundation around the world. We cover vast amount of the world. We have a lot of local groups everywhere. We have a very active, very young local group in Spain. And because we're here, I just want to talk about and highlight some things they have done. And the first thing I ever heard about the Open Knowledge Foundation in Spain was this event, or the event where this picture was taken. It was the Jornadas de Periodismo de Datos that happened at Blanquerna and CCGB this May. This was, I think, 5 months after the Open Knowledge Foundation in Spain was created, something like this. Yes, less than half a year after they have been created. Two very, very active members, Karma and Marc Cabra, who works with the ICIJ, the International Center for Investigative Journalists, said, we have to do something about data journalism in Spain. And we create this 3-day event where we bring together people who know about this, people who can teach skills, people who know how to visualize data, members of the Mozilla Open News community, and with people who want to learn. And we create a hackathon for people to create projects. And this was an incredibly well-organized and successful event. And I will mention they're doing this again. But they haven't been quiet since then. They started a series of monthly events here in Barcelona. They started a series of monthly events in Madrid. So every month there's going to be something. If data journalism and digital journalism is your thing, talk to this nice lady over here. Every month there's something happening, at least one workshop, and a group of people coming together and working on making data journalism stronger in Barcelona. They are currently working on a framework. Do you need power?
Yeah, I need power, thank you.
Yes. Power to the people. But your cell phone is not going to get any then. Sorry. Can we have an advertising while we rearrange the thing? No. So right now they're also working on a framework together with local authorities in Spain to increase transparency of local authorities. So they do a number of events. And if you're interested in anything I said so far, or you're interested in anything that comes up, talk to Karma. She's one of the members, I don't know exactly what I think you're a vice president of the Open Knowledge Foundation Spain. This is Mar. Okay, but she's one of the members. I don't know her role there, but she's a very active member. Talk to her. Figure out how you can get involved and work together to really use data and information to change society and to help people figure out their lives better. And the last thing we do is we share skills. And this is sort of my role there. And we do this through a variety of projects. And you see some pictures up here of us doing this in different places. One of the first things, and this is, I think, the reason I'm often thrown into rooms with journalists and talk to you as a person who seemingly knows anything about journalism, although the closest I've come to it before this was writing press releases and giving one or the other interview. The thing that really sort of crystallized this and brought us into this space is this little book. It's called the Data Journalism Handbook. It's a openly and freely available book on this website. It says datajournalismhandbook.org. You can also buy a copy from O'Reilly if you really like it and you want to have a paper version. But what is awesome about the digital version is that it now exists in 4 other languages. One of them is Spanish, thanks to La Nación in Argentina, who put in a lot of work to translate the concepts and the essays in the Data Journalism Handbook into Spanish. And this is a book that was edited by, in a collaboration by people from the European Journalism Center. I always mix up these acronyms. European Journalism Center and the Open Knowledge Foundation. And it not only was, so they were only the editors. The authors were really people who know data journalism, who do a lot of data work throughout the world. And they brought them all together to write this book. And what did I want to mention? Yes. And we didn't only publish the book, we also then created a place where people doing data journalism can exchange ideas and can exchange information and can talk about the projects they're doing, which is the Data-Driven Journalism mailing list. And this is the second biggest to the NICAR list about the topics, so to the US-specific computer-assisted reporting list. So we created these resources for data-driven journalism, but for many reasons, and reasons I mentioned before, we were not happy with the state of how how data is used and how data is turned into information, is turned into stories and campaigns. So we started doing another project, and this is where I come in. We started doing a project called the School of Data, which is a project to help people to turn data into information, into stories, and into campaigns. And we mainly care about two kinds of people right now. So we have two sections in our target audience. One is journalists and people who want to get into journalism and want to do data journalism, people like you. And the other one is civil society organizations, people who care about doing advocacy, who care about running campaigns effectively, about changing the way we work, or the government works, or we work in the world. And we provide different kind of things. We have a set of lessons and courses online you can just go and take and look at. We do workshops like the one I do this afternoon throughout the world. We run a blog where we collect data stories and collect interesting ways how to do things with data. That's more targeted towards people who already do a lot. And then finally, we're building a network of mentors, of people who care about turning data into information around the world, where we want to have, ideally we want to end up in a situation where there's one person near you that you could ask. You could just come and ask if you have a problem, if you get stuck, if you don't know where to start your investigations. There will be a person to ask. A person who knows about this, a person who knows a little bit about this, and who's connected with other people worldwide. And so we try to establish this, and this has been incredibly interesting this year, because I spent my time traveling to a lot of places doing things like this, where I come and I talk less, I show more how to do things with data. And so if you're interested in doing some things Aron hinted at, which is, for example, reverse engineering how websites work and getting data out of websites. This evening, I think at 5, we're going to be at CCCB.
Yes.
And I'm going to show you at least the basic steps into doing this. What's coming up, and this is somewhere where I'm getting close to the end of my presentation. Yes, I put the second one. So the Spanish group, the Spanish local group, they don't think about stopping this. So they thought last May was really, really successful. So let's take less than a year to create the same event again and do this in April, end of April 2014, here in Barcelona, and I think in some other cities around Spain. But I think the biggest thing is going to happen here again is the second Jornadas de Periodismo de Datos. If you weren't there this year, come there in April. I think it's a fantastic event, bringing together people who are interested in doing data journalism, and bringing in people who know about this around the world, bringing in experts to help you and sort of do practical workshops, do some talks, and really work on projects, because that's how I believe you learn best, is by just doing and working on projects. What's also coming up, at least for the Open Knowledge Foundation, is that we will have our biannual big community event called the Open Knowledge Festival in Berlin in July next year. And this will be an event that showcases all the different kind of work we do. So everything from data journalism to advocacy to working with galleries, working with designers, working in education, will be around there and showcasing what they're doing and really trying to fill Berlin with life. And as I know our community, this is not going to be limited to the 3 days that are mentioned here, or the 4 days that are mentioned here. This is going to be a whole week at least, with events happening before and events happening after and events happening during the festival. Because there's just so many things that happen in this space to show and to do. And with this, I leave you, and I'm looking forward to have some questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
If I didn't, no one of you raised your hands during my talk, so either I was incredibly boring, or I was incredibly clear, which I don't believe.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Do you have any questions for Michael? Yes, lots.
No questions. No questions? Very good.
Very good. You were.
Huh?
You were very clear.
No. I was really boring in this case. One thing I didn't mention at all is that I talked about the local groups and how we bring people together in different places. We also do this around different topics. So we have what we call the working groups, where we bring people together around specific topics. So people who, for example, care about public transportation have a working group. And figuring out how you can use open data, open knowledge in this terms of public transportation. We have people around all different kinds of areas. I don't know how many working groups there are. There are too many working groups for me to remember them. But there's one that I specifically love, and this is a working group called the Open Glam Working Group. And every time I love them because every time I think about them, I think of glittery pens and glam rock. But they're actually nothing in that way, or not really directly related to this. This is GLAM is an acronym that stands for galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And these are the people who care about the things we know as humanity and how we're going to preserve this and make this accessible in the digital age. So they care about old books, and they care about, yes, I'm going to show this. They care about the knowledge we have in libraries. They care about making galleries and making museums more open digitally to the public.
Show these websites.
And finally, there's a person there that created a project and the website called the Public Domain Review. And for some reason, this is the website we have that gets the most hits. This is a person who does nothing else all day, and a group of persons that do nothing else but curate public domain content. That means content or things where copyright has expired. And they work to dig out the most interesting stories in there, the most interesting pictures. They have movies, old movies, they have old photographs, they have paintings, they have texts that are interesting. This is a fantastic, they have scientific publications like the one here, that are old drawings of pollen, so of the, how to say, the dust that's created by flowers. And they dig this up through, I don't know where they find this, but they find a lot of this thing, and they curate it, and they bring beautiful things out to the public, and often old things, but it's very interesting to look at. So this is sort of another area of working. I think there is a website about working groups. Nope.
Which one?
I have no idea how to find this. I'll search this. In the meanwhile, you can think of. Very simple. There's somewhere in the menu. So you see the amount of working groups that are created, and some of them are very, very active, and some of them are less active. But they all unite people around making things more accessible.
I think, Michael, that we have, as like a journalist, we have an enormous opportunity to work in a different way that we have done until now with all this open knowledge and open documents and open data. And I have a question for you. What, do you have any question?
No.
Nothing at all? Oh, what a pity. Do you think that organizations, non-profit organizations as Open Knowledge Foundation could be a solution, or could be, yes, a solution to reach more engagement between citizens and governments or politicians? Do you think that all this, the work that you do here in Open Knowledge Foundation and all the collaborators and all the skills and tools that you create will be for a change in a social way?
That's a very good question. I hope they are, because otherwise we would not reach a way or the goal we set ourselves. I think some of them help doing this more directly, and some of them doing this more indirectly. But I think for me, one of the key points that I realized when I started doing this is I don't think we can sit there and wait for an organization to do something. I don't think that we should sit and think, oh, there's this organization called X, and they do this for me because they say they will do this. If you really want something to happen, the only way to get it to happen is to do it, right? So to find someone else who's interested in the same thing, and just do it. And this is the most important thing: is not to wait for someone to facilitate your communication with the government, or not to wait for the government to open up. And to give me more give me some transparency, but to actually force them to do so by trying to figure out what you can figure out without them collaborating and without them helping. And I think that's very important for people who work in investigative journalism, for example. Whenever we talk in places where there's, for example, no freedom of information law, people say, yeah, but it's so hard to get this stuff because we don't have freedom of information. Freedom of information laws make it a lot easier, or open data makes it a lot easier to get this information. But it's not something that is really, really necessary, right? You can find different ways to do investigative journalism. Mar told this when we were in Madrid, and she said, when I came back from the US and asked people how they do investigative journalism in Spain, they all recommended me whiskey bars. Get a taste in whiskey and figure out the best whiskey bars. Because this is a way to get your sources to talk. And this is the thing you really rely on, is having someone or find people who are willing to help you, either voluntarily or because they're so drunk they don't know what they're saying anymore. So freedom of information or open data helps you, makes it easier to get these sources or to get this kind of information, or to get a database like the one Aron mentioned with all the bridges. But they're not sort of the necessary, not really, really necessary. You can do it without. It's a lot more complicated and a lot more work without, but you still can do this, right? And this is, I think, a very important to see, that you don't have to wait until something happens or someone does something for you. You can start creating it, and you can start just pushing for it, and you can start doing things.
It's the second time this morning that I heard, if you want to do something, just do it. Aron first, and now you repeat.
Yeah, we come out of a similar school of thinking, I think.
Okay, Liv, you have a question?
Hello, thank you for your masterclass, Mr. Bauer. I'd like to ask you, you said that the goal of open data, open knowledge, sorry, is to use, reuse, redistribute to anyone, to anywhere, any data, to any purpose. I would like to ask you, is there any kind of regulation in order to avoid that some data that, for example, I can put on open on the web is misused? If I understand that my data is not used for a good purpose, is any kind of regulation I can ask to, I don't know, not to use that way?
This is a very good question. This is a question I get very often, and I have yet to figure out a way how to abuse data. I cannot imagine how you could abuse data. There's data I would restrict from opening up, things that contain a lot of personal information or information that can be broken down and can be de-anonymized to a single person, and there's very little you need to do to actually figure out. So research, for example, has shown that you can take 3 data points of a person, something like the year the person was born, the zip code, and the first name, and figure out who that person is. But open data per se doesn't give any kind of restrictions, right? And for me, the discussion about abuse of data is really one. I want to know how you can abuse data. If this was something very curious along the way, the first time the UK government started to release data, it released data with a statement that you are not allowed to use the data they release to criticize the government. Right? This would be such a restriction you talk about, would be, I give away the data, but you're not allowed to use it to criticize any work I do. Right? Because in their biggest fear was, we are so crappy that if we tell everyone what we do, everyone will come and laugh about us and sort of criticize us. The only way around this is really become better, right? Do a better job. One way you can abuse data is to misinterpret it, right? To take it and sort of put it into the wrong context, to not understand what's in there. This has happened recently in the UK with data they released from the NHS, or the National Health Service, where they looked at surgeries and death rates in surgeons. And one of the problems with the data set was they released a data set that did not include any risk adjustment. That just said this surgeon operates 500 patients a year, and of those 100 die. So it's a very bad surgeon. And this surgeon operates 200 a year, and none die. So it must be a better surgeon, right? I think most of the people understand that not every person who's sick is the same sort of risk of dying, and not every disease has the same risk, and not every operation has the same risk. So they didn't include this. And what happened, right? What happened was that sort of Yellow Press paper took this up and produced a list of the 10 worst surgeons in the UK, right? Which were absolutely not the 10 worst surgeons or the 10 worst surgery hospitals. I don't know whether it was hospitals or surgeons, which was absolutely not the way that it was in reality, because it just punishes surgeons who do operations that are not as good. But this was not actually a mistake that was done deliberately, or that was done or in my view, it was not a mistake that was produced by the Yellow Press. It was a mistake that was produced by the NHS, not giving out complete data and giving out enough metadata to explain me how this data is to be interpreted. So a lot of the things that come that are seen, or a lot of the fears that come up with, if I give you data, you will not understand what I'm doing and you will do something wrong and tell a wrong story, come from you not giving me enough information about the data you're giving me. If you give me data that just has a column that contains numbers with a very short description, which is usually the column title, which is 1 or 2 words. And you don't give me a description, a longer description of how this number got together and where this number comes from and how this number is to be interpreted. There's no way for me to do this correctly, right? You see this in some countries. They publish budgets in multiple currencies, and some of them actually don't write the currency they publish their budget in, right? And then I have to go and figure out whether this is currency A or currency B, things like that, right? So include one of the things that are incredibly important when data is released, and when you access data from somewhere, is figuring out the context, figuring out the metadata, figuring out what does it tell me, right? How clean is it? How reliable is it? How reliable are the methods they got their data from, right? If you, for example, use data from scientific studies, which is done very often, or from surveys, think of opinion polls, right? What happens in an opinion poll, and why are they always wrong, right? It's because they ask a certain subset of people, right? And then you need to figure out how many people did they ask, right? Did they ask 100 people, 1,000 people, maybe 10,000 people? Did they ask only 10? Did they only ask professionals, or did they do a telephone service where they call landline phones? Who of you still has a landline phone? I don't, right? So they wouldn't include a certain subset of the population by only calling landline phones. And of course, the survey is not going to show the reality. I've seen this recently in Madrid. We were at a hackathon, and a group of people worked on data of people migrating from Spain to other places. And they used data from different studies. And guess what? All the different studies had vastly different numbers of people who emigrate, because they use different sources and different ways to calculate this up to how many people leave. So if you give me a data set like this and just say number of people emigrating from Spain every year, it doesn't really help me if you don't tell me how I'm supposed to understand your data, right? Then I get another data saying the same data set saying the same thing, and then I'm terribly confused because you say it's 100,000 and they say it's 20,000. So who's right? In this case, probably no one. But things like this are incredibly things like getting additional data, getting additional information with it, are incredibly important. And I think this is the best way to mitigate your data to be interpreted in the wrong way, is to give as much data as you can, give as much information with it, as much context with it, to help other people to understand it. I hope this sort of answers the question.
Yes, he answers you.
Surgeons. In the case that you said that the surgeons, the list of the worst surgeons, Open Knowledge Foundation has any way to denounce it? Oh, look, these ones are misusing our information, or you don't, or you just don't.
I mean, this is something you can do as the person. This is not something we were involved in, but this is something that NHS did immediately after this story, and the working up of this was actually very, very interesting. When they said, "Hey, actually, by the way, this is not what the data tells you, right? You didn't interpret this correctly." But it also led to them having to admit that they made a mistake, that they did not release the full data set in a way that it should be used. And their argument for not releasing this in full with the risk-adjusted scores was they didn't want to confuse people. And I don't see this, I personally don't see this as an argument, right? What confuses people more? If you have a wrong list of surgeons in the newspaper, or if you have a list of if you have a data set that you need to think a little bit to understand it. I think the primer confuses people more. So I think, I don't know whether they realized this as their mistake, but actually it was a mistake in the amount of data and how the data was released, and much more than, and they had to do this publicly, right? They had to step up publicly to say, by the way, this is not the way, it seems. And then there's the usual way you can use media laws to sort of get things like this away, right? Where you say, okay, this is actually going close to defamation or libel or not telling the truth. I think many countries have laws like this to use for the media. So this is a very important point for you as a journalist, right? If you use a database and you write a story based on this database, and you, for example, write a story and you expose something, people who are not happy with this will accuse you of doing something wrong. So the very important lesson there is for you to write down and note what you're doing, right? Document the process of what you're doing. If you're doing an investigative piece and it's very, very critical, find a colleague who can check it. Find a colleague who knows about data analysis and give them the data and see whether they can get the same conclusions, whether they can understand what you did, whether they would do the same thing, whether they would use the same kinds of analysis to come to a conclusion. And only then, if you really, really check this, really well documented your process, really made sure that someone else would do the same, who would do the same process, would come to the same conclusion, you publish it. Because then you can, anytime you're accused of introducing a mistake or biasing your report or your story, you can simply say, by the way, this is the data I got from this official site, right? And this is what I did. And everyone can go and do the same thing and come to the same conclusion. And if there's no mistake in your process, there's no way you can be held accountable for someone else releasing data that's not correct.
Any other question? My last question would be, we are learning now what is open data, big data, small data, all around data.
Oh yeah, let's talk about open big data a bit.
And with organizations like Open Knowledge Foundation, we have skills and digital tools to work with this data. And citizens, not only programmers or journalists are working with data, any kind of citizens. And my question is, how do you see the future with working with this data, communicate us with this data? Because work with data has responsibilities, risks and opportunities to go ahead. So how do you see the future in the next year when work with data will be global in any country, in any situation, in any company, in any, we have lots of news now about what risks are with the governments, with our data, that we live in social media and other examples. What is your opinion?
For one, I think it's important to note that data won't go away. So this is something that has started, and this is something that will not in any way stop. So data will be used. Right now, it's primarily used by big companies or by secret organizations in the Secret Service to figure out things about citizens. Figure out things whether or not you belong to a political group or whether you like to buy a certain brand of cosmetics. So really, really turning you into money. So data won't go away. The one thing I hope that we can reach is that these governments and these organizations are not the only ones who can use data, right? Right now, if you think of data as information and information as power, right now we have a tremendous power imbalance in our society. We have big organizations, big corporations, and state-owned institutions who have a lot of data and have a lot of knowledge about how to process this and turn this information. And we have a large group of citizens who don't, right? We have to level the playing fields, and we can do so in several ways. Open data is one of them, like asking governments and asking companies to release more data, get more data and be more transparent and help us to understand those. Data protection laws is the other thing, right? It's the other side. Help to protect us from having our personal data used in ways that would harm us as a society. For example, figuring out whether we want to go to a protest or not. Right? I learned there's this fantastic law in Spain that you're not allowed to say anymore that you want to protest in front of Congress. Right? This is something in a democracy I should be supposed to say out loud, that I want to go protest in front of Congress. You're not allowed to do this anymore, right? So the Spanish government could work with social networks like Facebook, or could ask WhatsApp, right? Really popular. Ask WhatsApp. Say, hey, by the way, we're the Spanish government. We want to get every message that says protest and says Congress in the same thing, and we want to know what phone number was this, because they know your phone number. Right, and then they go to your mobile phone provider and say, by the way, we want to know who is this, which people does this person communicate with, and where is this person currently? All right. So this is something that really hinders, in a way, your rights as citizens, right? Because you're not allowed to express discontent with your government anymore in a free forum. So we need laws, and this is really in the realm of data protection, to protect use of data in a way that harms us as citizens. It sort of makes us second class, or reduces us to the role of consumers. And the third thing is really educate people, and this is sort of the stuff I do right now, is help people to make sense of the data that's around them and that's released. A lot of information is actually public. A lot of information is somewhere there. We just have to use it effectively to be able to expose what is happening, to be able to expose that contracts are given away to the friends of politicians, to be able to expose that certain things are not the way they're supposed to be, or we want them to be. So I think the risks, and this is something you talk about, is the risk that we lose a lot of our authority and a lot of influence. But the opportunities is that we can do so much more with what we have. And the thing we need to do is to learn how to deal with this new digital world that becomes more and more reliant on data. There was a question in the back there.
Yes, there is a question.
Yeah. First of all, I want to apologize for my English. I will need traduction for any words. I want to ask you for your opinion of one thing that happens in the last elections. No, I don't know in English. What's the word? Elections? It's the same? Yeah. Election? Yeah. One newspaper published one information about one of the candidates, an information that after va ser demostrat que era falsa. Fue demostrada que era falsa y voy a seguir en castellano si no le importa. Fue demostrada que era falsa y son dos preguntas en una. ¿Cuál es la información? Era sobre que uno de los candidatos tenía unos fondos de dudosa procedencia en un paraíso fiscal. Mi pregunta es, ¿qué valoración hace usted de lo que sucedió y de que este periódico publicara esta información en un periodo electoral? Y por otro lado, basándose un poco en esto, que nos dé un poco su opinión sobre el periodismo aquí en España y en Cataluña, porque lo que sucede en Estados Unidos y lo que sucede aquí es bastante distinto, porque yo no creo que seamos aquí capaces de encontrar webs y sitios web que ofrezcan información libre o que se den casos como los de Wikileaks o Snowden. Ya está.
I think I understood the question. So the first question, I'll repeat your question as I understood them, and you correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So the first question was about a case where there was wrong information published about a political candidate in an election and what you can do against sort of this being published in the paper, information that later turns out to be false. And the second question was about the state of journalism in Catalonia and how because you don't think they have similar capacities and capabilities as, for example, in the United States. And you have a lot more, yes, and you have a lot more influence of politics. To the first question, I do believe that you already have media laws that allow you to sue people if they do something wrong and have to publish actually. At least in Austria, it's the way that if I, as a newspaper, publish a story wrong, I have to publish in the same spot. If I get convicted, I have to publish in the same spot that I reported this wrong. This is the one thing. The second thing is I learned through experience and being a CIA spy in a newspaper for a very short period of time that there's actually often bad news is good news. So I woke up one morning. I need to see whether I found this. I woke up one morning and a local newspaper published this story. This is in German. I apologize, but this is a story about how an organization I work with, and this on the left side is this the left? No, on the right side is a really good friend of mine, and we work together in building a citizen network similar to what Gifinet does in Catalonia. And this is a story about how we actually are a technology company that provides spy networks to the CIA. This was two years before the Snowden things. And it actually says that, oh, I thought it's 5. We have a budget of $70 million given to us directly by the nice gentleman on the left side. So this is one of the stories that might be in this category. And one thing this piece of news created was actually a lot of interest in what we are doing, and a lot of newspaper stories ridiculing this reporter for not understanding anything he writes about, and created a lot of beneficial attendance for us. But on the other hand, you're right. It's especially in political elections, and if the process is not as quick as in our case, where everyone who read this, who knew this is complete bullshit, it's very hard. It's very hard to get you right, and often if you go to court, this takes a very long time. So what really helps there is to help being upfront about things and to really show that this is something that hasn't done, and then that's not true, and really start going the legal way and suing them. The second question was about the media in Catalonia and the capacities and influence about political influence. Political influence in media is something that unfortunately is a reality, that there is a lot of political interests in newspapers, in TV, etc. Either be it through direct ownership or be it through subsidies or advertising. And this is actually I think one of the biggest problems media has right now in Europe. And Spain and Catalonia is by no way the only country this is happening. I come from Austria. Austria is a media wasteland. This is really a sad spot to live in if you like good journalism and good reporting. So you're not alone in this. This is the first thing you want to say. Yeah, I want to say there. Often, if I go to places and I travel quite a bit. I've been to I think 20 countries this year. This is a question I often get: is the US is so amazing. right? They have all this. They have all these things, and they can do all this. We cannot do this. Our journalists don't have the capacity. Our media is not intelligent enough, etc., etc. I don't think that's necessarily true, right? I talk here to the next generation of journalists, right? This is not going to change tomorrow by changing the guys who are in charge now. This is going to change by you taking up your work and you keeping up your ethics and you bringing a new style into media. This is not going to change tomorrow, but in 10 years, the media landscape, if you continue working and you continue being active and you continue to be critical to what's happening, in 10 years, the media landscape will look very, very different. Sometimes, and no, I don't think sometimes, I think most of the times, change does not happen in big institutions, right? If you go to the biggest newspaper you have in your country and you start working there, it's very, very hard to change it. If you start a small dynamic media outlet, really making an impact as a single individual or a group of individuals is possible, right? Sometimes small media can sort of outplay bigger ones by just being more agile, by just being more dynamic, and by just being more innovative than the big ones. Aron told the story about the New York Times, how hard it was for them to get interactives displayed on their site. Right? This is a big organization, the New York Times. Everyone looks up to them now, but they were not the first to do this. Other ones were much faster in implementing this because they were smaller. It was easier to change from within. If you go into a big organization, a big established outlet, you're not going to do this. The best journalism right now, for example, in Austria, is done by small groups of people who are coming together, often in their free time, to research investigative projects, and they do amazing projects. One of them was exactly about political influence in media. They went and they counted all the political advertising that was in media, by parties, by ministries, etc. And they counted and documented all this, and showed how this is used as a tool to sort of put media also into pressure, by saying, by the way, if you don't write this story nicely for me, I will just cut my advertising to you, right? And they know that media really relies on advertising. And this actually led to now, or went very closely to now, official bodies have to report how much they put advertising in which kind of newspaper. And a lot of interesting stories come out there, which local government advertises in which media. Often you find that there are parties or organizations that are very close to parties that have newspapers or magazines, and for a disproportional amount of money, a ministry who's held by this party publishes advertising there, right? Just to finance their own party propaganda, etc. Right? These are fantastic stories that were uncovered and were put into process by a group that came together to do investigative reporting outside of classic newspaper structures, and they're incredibly successful in that way. They're less successful financially because no one agrees to pay them, but they're incredibly influential in a way that if they publish something, a lot of people read it and a lot of people see it as good quality. So you can make a change. One thing is, it's very hard to rely on big institutions, right? And one thing is, it's very hard to rely on people who are already there and who are already in the system. So it's easier to start something new and to get change doing by new people. A physicist once said this very nicely. He said that it's a sad fact that scientific theories don't get adopted because they are convincing, but they got adopted because the people who don't think this theory is right die. Right? This is the same in media. For the media to change and to become better, it takes you, all of you here, to go there and to do it better. It will not just change because the people who are already doing this, who are already in the routine, suddenly think, okay, we've done something wrong for 5 years or for 10 years, or all the 50 years of my life I've sitting behind my desk here, I've done something wrong. This will not happen. It will only happen if you go there and you do it. And you slowly bring in the change. I think you had a question. Yes?
Okay.
No? There.
Okay. The first question is how open knowledge finance himself, and it is sustainable. And the second question is that a lot of people right now think that they can get the access to culture and journalism for free. And what do you think about this thinking, or this way of thinking?
Okay, very good. The first one is a fantastic question, and this is one of the questions I frequently get when I introduce the Open Knowledge Foundation. It's a very important one. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have our budget openly available. The Spanish working group has. If you go to okfn.es, they make public every euro that comes in here. I think here, nuestras cuentas, no?
Las cuentas claras.
So they publish this fantastic spreadsheet. You can look where the money comes from. For the general, so the bigger umbrella organization, we are mostly funded by grants. The project, and mostly project-specific grants. So the School of Data is, for example, funded by grants from the Open Society Foundation. So our good friend George Soros, whatever you think of them. We are funded by a foundation called ULET, specifically for doing work in Latin America and more and more in Africa. We're also sponsored or funded to do similar work by the World Bank. So this is a large part of where we got our money from, as different donors and different projects. We have some of the projects the Open Knowledge Foundation does are research projects together with the European partners. So we get European research money in for some of the projects. But these are all project-bound funds. Then we have a group of people who work a lot around CCAN, who do software consultancy, who do actually paid services for governments. For example, one of our largest clients for a long time was DataGov UK. So the UK government who gave us money for building their open data portal. This still goes on in less dimensions, but we've got a lot more people interested in this right now. So this is another way we get money in. And the last thing is donations and things like crowdfunding campaigns. The public domain review, for example, is entirely crowdfunded, at least for this year. They started a crowdfunding campaign, and because this is a really popular sort of service, they were able to be entirely crowdfunded for the period of this year. Unfortunately, as I said, this is nothing that is openly available. And the second question, what was the second question? It was a very interesting. The free access to all kinds of journalism. This is a very good debate to have. I was asked this earlier in an interview on how do I see business models for media, and I honestly have to say I don't know. For one thing, I think as someone who produces media, you want as many people as possible to see it. And you want to have as much impact with your story as possible. But this often conflicts with the idea of giving something out on a subscriber-only basis, right? Giving something out that is behind a paywall, or that's only there if you subscribe to the newspaper. I honestly don't have a good answer on business models. On the idea of having everything free, I can live in a world where not everything is free, right? I can understand that people want to have money for it. I prefer things to be free and openly accessible, and in some situations this is a no-brainer. For example, this article I published here, it's a scientific article, and it's still a rarity that scientific articles are just able to be accessed by anyone out there. And most of the scientific articles are still behind paywalls, behind very, very expensive paywalls of scientific publishers. And what this does is that a government finances people like me, researchers, to do research that then is published in a form that is not accessible to citizens or other researchers. So they have to pay again, and we as citizens have to pay again to get the results of this out. So for some forms of publishing, and scientific publishing is I think the best example for this, I would totally agree that this should be freely and openly available. For other things, like if you write you're a journalist and you write a fantastic story, this is a good question. I don't know how you envision to find this balance, but I think we have to find this balance, and I think this is something we have to discuss, and this is something we have to figure out: is how much is it worth? How can we balance accessibility of stories with paying for stories, or with making money? I don't know. The snowfall, if you saw this fantastic example before, I don't see any ads in the page, right? There's no restriction for any users to go there. I don't know how the idea is of the New York Times to pay this journalist for writing this 19,000 word piece, right? It's probably cross-funded somehow. And if you look at big media organizations, what happens more and more is this kind of cross-funding, right? Condé Nast, for example, owns Reddit, right? So these are the people who publish the Vogue and the Vanity Fair, and they own a thing that sort of brings you memes and the weirdest discussions on the internet. But they do this because they diversify their business strategy. The Spiegel in Germany, so Axel Springer, owns a ton of other websites. They make much more money off than of journalism, and sort of funds itself that way. So maybe free access journalism is possible. We just didn't find out how. Maybe it's a question of will. Maybe it's not possible, and we will realize in 20 years that if I want to get a good article and I want to read good newspapers and I want to read good news journalism, the only way to get it is to subscribe to a newspaper that exclusively delivers me this. And I'm one of the people who happily subscribes to newspapers, right? And subscribes to, not to newspapers, more to magazines or weekly newspapers, right? So this is something I think we have to continue the discussion, and the media landscape also needs to be involved in discussion and figure out and think about it creatively. How can we finance this?
Interesting debate, Michael, but it's time to lunch.
Is it already?
Yeah, it is already. Jo, per acabar, només volia... Com et dius el que has preguntat tu allà? Tu? Javi? David. No, només volia dir una cosa al David i a tots els que esteu aquí, no? Com ha dit el Michael, sou la nova generació de periodistes. Tots vivim ja a internet. I si teniu alguna informació que pot contradir el que s'ha publicat en un mitjà gran i aquesta informació està verificada, contrastada, seguint les pautes del bon periodisme, seguint el que ja s'ha comentat aquí del just do it, jo diria just publish it, o sigui, publica-la, estàs vivint a internet, ja t'arribarà el treballar en un gran mitjà, però de moment tens moltes eines a través de blogs, social media, pàgines web que pots crear, que no necessites com a periodista esperar que un mitjà t'obri la porta de la seva redacció. D'acord? Jo, aquest seria el consell que us dono a tots. I a més, esteu estudiant en una facultat en què teniu professors i tot el material que necessiteu per aprendre recursos digitals o aprendre a com moure's en aquest món digital com a periodistes. I aquesta sessió d'avui és una prova. Hem tingut l'editor multimèdia de New York Times i hem tingut el privilegi també d'estar aquí ara amb Michael Bauer de l'Open Knowledge Foundation. És perquè se us obri el cap, les idees, de la possibilitat en el món que esteu vivint i en el món que haureu de treballar i en el món que haureu de crear probablement nous mitjans. Ja ho deixo aquí perquè tots tenim gana. Moltes gràcies per haver assistit.